Hey guys, welcome back to the Obi Thorn Alliance. What are we doing today, Jacob?
We're reviewing Air.
So, if you want to see what we think about Air, stick around. So, summarise or tell me kind of in a nutshell what happens in Air.
Well, this film is basically showing the fight for Michael Jordan with Nike, Adidas, trying to fight to get Michael Jordan's shoes.
Yeah, so for those that are living under a rock and don't know what happens, basically the Air Jordans are the biggest selling shoes in the world, have been for quite a long time. Nike were the first people to sign Michael Jordan and started by making shoes branded with his name on it, which at the time was extremely unique. Michael Jordan was most likely to sign with Adidas or Converse, who were the biggest brands in the basketball world at the time. Nike really doing well in running shoes, but their basketball department was about to be closed unless they could do something to turn it around. Sonny Vaccaro, played by Matt Damon, decides that he wants to throw their whole budget at getting Michael Jordan. Instead of signing 3 people, he wants to sign just 1 person. Michael Jordan had just recently won the college championship shooting a 3-pointer on the buzzer. And he just had a feeling that Michael Jordan was going to go on to be something amazing. So they fight. As you know how it ends, they get his signature and then the rest is history. But in saying that, did you like it?
Oh, I thought the movie was amazing, directed by Ben Affleck. His directing skills is amazing, and even though we already know the destination, the journey was still somehow amazing with how the emotions and seeing the fight that Nike had to go through, it made the emotions strings feel quite amazing.
Yeah, it was great to see what actually happened to make this happen. Obviously, this all happened before we were born, and probably for a lot of you guys were born. And we just assumed that Nike was huge. They signed Michael Jordan, and of course they were going to be successful. But it wasn't the case. There's a lot more to it. I think Nike probably have a lot to thank Michael Jordan for their success, not just in basketball. Nike is now, well, at the time they were big in running, but they're just big in everything now. They got their hands in everything, and they've gone on to sign the biggest athletes in most sports, whether it be soccer or whether it even be golf, with Tiger Woods being marquee signing of Nike many years ago. So it really lays the platform for how big we know Nike to be now. So should we get into a score?
Yeah.
Okay, so as always, we've got our 10 categories where we give a score from 1 to 10 in each, and then it tallies to give us a number out of 100. So what did you give the plot?
I gave a plot a well-deserved 8. We already know what the outcome is, and that's it is a true story. It's an amazing true story, but unfortunately you kind of already know what the ending is, so there's no drama. Some people might get frustrated because they already know what the outcome is, but the flip side with that the journey is well worth it, and still I felt very enthralled and really enjoyed the journey. And sometimes the journey is better than the end goal, and that's why I really enjoyed the plot. Even though it didn't get a 10, best true story for a plot, even though it was basically about people trying to get someone to be in their shoe.
So the plot, very similar to Jacob. It's where I've given probably the worst score at 7.5. Only because the story itself is not really that interesting. It's signing someone to be part of a shoe brand. But all the other components as we get through the rest of the rating is what makes the movie great. So a 7.5 in the plot, just because it is in essence a boring story, but it gets told well. So based upon just the facts and how the plot is, it gets a low mark. What about characters?
For me, it's a 10. I love all the characters seen. Sonny, played by Matt Damon. Ben Affleck playing the manager. All the characters, I think, are definitely standouts. And the actors as well. Really enjoyed how they did the 80s style with the characters. Really likable characters. Really enjoyed their characters.
So I also gave it a perfect 10. These are people that I've never heard of before. Sonny Vaccaro or Phil Knight, who was the CEO or possibly is still the CEO of Nike. They were great, just really good characters. It did help the actors that portrayed them, but 10 out of 10 for me. About the acting.
Acting as well with 10. Matt Damon, Ben Affleck, Jason Bateman. The list goes on. This is definitely one of Matt Damon's best performance, definitely best acting of the year, and really enjoyed the performances. It got emotional. The pitch, when they're doing their pitching to Michael Jordan's family, I really enjoyed the speech they gave to Michael Jordan and his family. That's the usual problem with the movie. It is strange how they did do that scene, but besides that, the acting is incredible.
So I've given the acting a perfect 10 as well, I think. One superstar cast, but they all did a great job. Matt Damon, Ben Affleck, Chris Tucker was really good in this movie, and I think Jason Bateman was the silent killer in this movie. I guess he wasn't the main character, but I actually enjoyed his performance probably the most, or it was, for what we're used to seeing Jason Bateman do, I think he really shone in this. But, he does do some serious roles, but comedy, I think, is where he kind of makes his name, but he did a really good job in this. So perfect 10. Entertainment factor. How entertaining was this for a true story?
For me, it was a 9. I really enjoyed, even though I already knew the outcome. For me, the journey was well worth it. I really enjoyed the atmosphere, the music, the 80s throwback to the haircuts and the costume. Really enjoyed the scene when Ben Affleck is the CEO, how when he turned out in his running suit, just everything about the 80s tone, even though I wasn't around in the 80s, was just really entertaining. It's really cool to see how it was back in the 80s, and it must have been a really fun time living in that era of time. It was just entertaining seeing the 80s time.
I gave it a 9.5. It was extremely entertaining for what is seemingly not that entertaining of a story. I was enthralled, edge of my seat the whole time. Even though you know what's going to happen, you still wanted to see how they got there, so loved it all. About visuals or the presentation of this movie?
For me, it's an 8. I really enjoyed how the music, seeing the visuals of how they showed how he receives a text machine, and then he has to go and receive a call, just different visuals and things that the movie does, pays a lot of homage to the 80s, and really enjoyed the atmosphere of the presentation.
So I gave the visuals and presentations a 9.5. I think this was one of the most standout things in this movie. From the first scene with the music kicking in, playing Dire Straits, such a good riff to start the movie off, throughout hit after hit from the 80s. Camera work, the filters, the choice of when to be close in or zoomed out, it all just worked really well and shows how Ben Affleck is as a director. The music was the standout. I think they nailed it in terms of the costumes and even the finer details of presentations. Matt Damon's character goes into the 7-Eleven, furniture within the office. I think they didn't miss anything. They made sure they got every little detail correct, which I really, really liked. What about the pacing or feel?
A 9. I really enjoyed the pacing between seeing how the movie flowed. There was no boring moments. Really enjoyed the atmosphere of how each scene didn't waste your time. Everything had meaning to it, with how he had a meeting with Michael Jordan's mum, and then he said this is going to go how it went, and then he was spot on. Like, every scene had meaning and consequences. But for a movie that was so particular, the scene we'll talk about in spoilers, it was just so jarring why nothing happened there. Like, humans don't do that, and that's the one nitpick with the pacing or acting that the movie does. But besides that, everything was perfect.
I gave the pacing a 9. I think it wasn't too long, it wasn't too short. It flowed the whole way through and just kept me entertained because of that. It didn't try and drag out scenes too long. It didn't try and bombard you with facts or text. It just kept you engaged the whole way. What about the ending?
I gave it a 10, even though we already knew the outcome of the ending. I was still, when they got Mike and Jordan, I was like, they were the underdogs, and they got their prize, and felt really happy for them. When we finally got to see their shoe and they were going to take the fines, it was just really empowering, and you felt really happy for them as a company. very satisfying ending and well worth watching the movie for that ending.
I also gave it a 10. We knew what was going to happen, but I like how they built it up to get there. They didn't rush it. I liked that after we kind of got the ending within the film, we then got some cut scenes afterwards of Michael Jordan and lots of facts about different characters within the movie and what Michael Jordan went on to do. And I liked that. I think they didn't drag it on too much, but they gave you a few things that built some context to the weight of what happened within this movie. So it's a 10 for me. What about originality and uniqueness, which is a tricky one because it is because it is a true story. So
I gave it an 8. Look, we've seen a lot of true stories before. Normally, true stories look at the players' upbringing, how they got successful or didn't get successful. This is more about the company of the shoe, and for that it's unique, but it is a true story, so it loses points for that. But I still enjoyed the fact that it's a true story, but because it is a true story, it's not that original, because there's plenty of true stories, but because it's about a shoe, I can't think of any other true stories that talk about the product instead of the person.
So I gave it an 8.5. I actually think it is unique because of what it's focused on. Yes, we know what happens. It is a true story, but they've found something that's not that interesting and made it interesting and created a story out of it. And also the way it came about, screenwriter for this movie was watching The Last Dance, and they mention about Nike and how they got Michael Jordan. He thought, oh, surely someone's written or made a movie or a documentary about this, but in fact they hadn't. So he then went on to write it, and to get Ben Affleck and Matt Damon involved is pretty massive. So I actually think it is really unique the way that they've told a story about something not that interesting. So what about the target audience?
I gave this topic a 9. For me, if you're a sporting fan, you're going to see this. If you're a fan of the actors that are in this movie, you're going to see this. I think the 1% that won't see this are people that don't like sports or don't like the actors. Those people will be out there that will be like, oh, why would I see if I don't like sports, if I don't like the actors? But besides that, you're going to see this movie, and I think it hits the target audience, because who doesn't want to see sports movies? And Nike, I think it nails it, but it's not going to appeal to everyone, because some people might not even care about Michael Jordan's shoes.
I gave it a perfect 10 because not only does it meet and hit the target for the target audience, I think it also attracts people that would not usually be interested in basketball. So I think for that, it actually goes beyond its target audience and is kind of limitless in who it can attract. And the sports fans, it was very interesting, but not, your atypical thing you expect. And then, as I said, for people that aren't sports fans, they've been dragged into it and gone, oh, there's something in this for me too. So it's a 10 because of that, of its time value. Was it worth watching?
For me, this is a 10. I was thoroughly entertained. Acting, performance, everything about it. For me, I know this might be a big call, but for me, this is the best movie at the moment for the year. Everything for time value, this is the most movie that I felt satisfying with. Acting, filmmaking, everything about it is superb. The only thing that it doesn't do well is the one scene that was very jarring and wrecks it and the story, but besides that, yeah.
So I gave it a 9.5 because it is definitely worth watching. I don't think it's a 10. I don't think it's absolutely everyone must watch this. It's just most people should watch this. So I'm going to give it a 9.5, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. So for me, it was definitely worth watching, but I couldn't recommend it to absolutely everyone. So that's why I'm not going to give it a perfect score. So what was your total score, Jacob?
Out of 100, this gets the biggest score for a movie review, 91%. I think it definitely deserves that score. It's the best movie of the year so far. Very highly caliber actors, directing, everything about it. Go out and see it, and don't take my word for it. Just go out and see it.
So I gave it added up to being 93.5% for. I agree. I think it's probably the best movie this year. May by the end of the year still be the best movie, mainly because of how wide of a reach it can appeal to, the superstars that are in it. And I didn't actually know this movie was coming, and then suddenly it's out, and I was like, well, I'll go give it a watch, and I was enthralled. It was fantastic. So because of that, I like a silent, surprising film, something that I don't know is coming. There's no expectations of it, and I had a feeling that this storyline's going to be. I just had a feeling it was going to be bad. I was like, I think they're just going to get it wrong, but then you got to keep in mind Matt Damon. So Matt Damon seems to always be in good films, and Ben Affleck's just one of the best actors of all time, and he directing it. He's only directed 5 films, including this one, and they've all been really, really good. So he's selective. So that should have made me had more faith in it, and then it delivered in the end. So I really, really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
So let's get into some discussion. So spoilers, I guess, if you haven't seen the film, in terms of if you don't know about the Michael Jordan story and Nike by now, then you may as well keep watching because this probably won't affect it. So what parts of the film do you specifically want to talk about?
Oh, I guess the scene I was alluding to in the meeting room when Matt Damon was saying, "You are greatness," but for some reason it was very jarring. They didn't feel a reason for him to respond what a normal human being would respond, and I don't buy that. In the actual meeting, Michael Jordan wouldn't actually be assertive. He's Michael Jordan. His mum and dad basically spoke and he didn't say anything. But when they had the phone call, they must have recorded like Michael Jordan or something. It was very weird, that scene.
Yeah, the movie obviously tactically didn't want to focus too much on Michael Jordan, so they try to hide the actor's face. They didn't have him say any lines, and I found that weird. Like, I didn't need to focus on Michael Jordan, but it came across like this guy is rude and arrogant, which, if you've seen The Last Dance, that pretty much makes out that Michael Jordan is rude and arrogant. So are we starting to get a common theme? Is he actually rude and arrogant, or does he just not even care because he's okayed both these projects and he seems to have no problem with the way he's portrayed? So I don't know, maybe when you're that famous, you just don't care what people think about you. But they did definitely portray him as either rude or unable to speak, or that his mum does everything for him. It was a weird way to come across, but you can see why they did it.
Did you buy the scene when Sonny and Michael Jordan's mum had that conversation and Sonny's like, look, the meetings with the 2 other companies are going to go exactly the same. Do you buy in the actual meetings that he was 100% right?
Probably not. I think they probably embellished that for the sake of Hollywood. He probably suggested a few things of how it might go, but specific details probably not. Or maybe he did nail it. I don't know. I guess that's something we'll have to look into, but it seems a bit embellished, or most likely to be that case.
Favorite performance?
Well, Matt Damon gets most of the screen time. I really liked Ben Affleck, how he portrayed Phil Knight. As I said earlier, I think Jason Bateman stands out because it was, again, showed what a class actor he can be for someone that's been stereotyped with comedic roles. So I'm going to go with him as the standout, or the most surprising. Matt Damon was the best, and Ben Affleck just did what Ben Affleck does. He's always amazing.
And in your mind, who do you think was the one that came up with Air Jordan? Was it the person that was doing the shoe, or was it the sporting agent?
I don't know why they added that fact, or whether it's because it actually is, they don't know. But I reckon it was probably the guy that made the shoe. And I think they wanted to portray sport agent because it kind of fitted in with his personality. I really liked his performance. I thought it was great. It gave a very Wolf of Wall Street feel with him and the way he interacts with people. And I don't know much about that actor, but he did a really good job in that. But to your original question, I reckon it was the shoe manufacturer or the guy that designed the shoe. What do you think?
I think it was the person that created the shoe.
But as I said, maybe that is the funny thing about the story. They don't know and they can't remember because it's something that someone could have thrown up in the air. Like, oh, yeah, call them Air Jordans. I was like, oh, okay. And who knows?
Didn't like about the movie?
Not really. I think it nailed most of it, ignoring the fact I would have liked to have seen Michael Jordan portrayed a bit differently. It just came across weird, like you were trying to hide him. But other than that, everything else, if it was factually correct, an amazing story. And visually, this film stands out. And I guess it comes into visuals, but I've said before, the music selection was phenomenal. The 80s obviously was so much good music came out in the 80s, but they really nailed it with the song choice. I really liked when they played the Money's for Nothing by Dire Straits. I think that is a perfect song for the time they chose it, and I think they just absolutely nailed it with each time they play different songs.
And how did you find that Sully was able to pick Michael Jordan? Did you buy that he was able to see that he had that talent?
If that's true, I think that's pretty clever. Watch that, and everyone knows, oh, well, he hit the winning shot. Of course he's a good player. But he's noticed that he was a rookie, well, a freshman, or like he's very young, like, I'm not sure. He was like the youngest in his team, and they gave him the ball with the winning shot, and he said, oh, well, you can see here, he shot straight away, so he knew that was the game plan. That was their first choice. And they go, there's something special about this guy. If his teammates and his coach decide to give him the winning shot and not someone else. And whether or not that's true, you could probably find that pretty easily. If that was their game plan, I'm sure they would have talked about it after. But if that was the one thing that made him realize he was a superstar, that's pretty incredible. But I think every sign pointed to the fact that Michael Jordan was going to be a superstar. I think Blind Freddie would have been able to pick that this guy's going to be something special. In terms of, was he going to be able to sell their products? I don't know. I guess that's what's magical about it, because you could put that time, Larry Bird and Magic Johnson were the face of Converse, but they didn't explode and make things happen like Michael Jordan did. So, and like arguably those two players are as good or maybe even better than Michael Jordan, but he's the one that had the shoe line that went on to have all the success and they didn't. So maybe there was something as well about how marketable he was as a person. Sorry.
Did you remember seeing that what made Michael Jordan respect Nike more was that Sully knew the assistant coach? Did you buy that?
Yeah, probably. Yeah, I believe that. And also that he favoured Nike supposedly because they talked about what he could do and how they could like work as a brand opposed to like, oh, we're Converse, we've got the biggest names and you're going to be another one. And instead Nike are like, well, you're going to be everything to us. But they had no one else. So I don't know if something special. It's like they didn't have anyone else to choose from or anyone to compare him with. So,
well, thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, like and subscribe. As always, you're awesome and keep being awesome. And see you next time. Bye-bye.